Joe Paterno is a staple in Central PA. His accomplishments as the head coach of the Penn State football program the past 45 years have gone unmatched in history. This video will outline Joe's major landmark victories and provide an in-depth look at how much coverage centered around Paterno, the game, and why. The year was 1966, and Joe Paterno had just taken over the head coaching position at Penn State from his mentor, Rip Engel. Rip stepped down after 15 years as a head coach with an overall record of 104, 48, and 4. He passed the team off to Paterno after a dismal 5-5 season, playing all unranked teams. Paterno was 40 years old. The football team was coming off a rough season, but many were excited to see the new young head coach in action in the season opener. Over 37,000 fans came out to see the game at Beaver Stadium. The Nittany Lions were taking on Maryland, a weaker opponent who went 4-6 the past season. Maryland had a history of being a consistently losing rival. Penn State had played them every year since 1960, losing only in 1961. They had defeated them last season, 19-7, in Maryland. In 1966, technology was still developing. It had only been 27 years since the first American football game was broadcasted on television, and Penn State was nowhere on the map. Paterno had yet to begin his conquest of building the nationally recognized Penn State brand, so the team received hardly any media attention. The only known record of Paterno's first game was shot as coach's footage. There was no color, no commentary, and no excitement. Amazing to today's standard, Paterno was only shown on camera once, at the end of the game after his team delivered him his first win as the head coach of the Nittany Lions. A few reporters approached him on the field afterwards, where he paused for a picture or two, and then continued his run off the field. His next big win would come 10 years later. The 70s were a great year for Coach Paterno and his football squads. They had at least 10 game-winning seasons every year since 1971, and in 76 were coming off of a 9-3 75 season. Paterno was 10 years wiser and 10 years more experienced. People now knew of the young coach, and he was beginning to build the PSU brand that those today are so accustomed to. His 100th win was on Senior Day, the last home game of the season. North Carolina State was another consistent losing rival. In 1976, the series record stood at 17 Penn State wins and only 2 losses. However, the last time that these two teams met, in the previous year, North Carolina State pulled out a 15-14 victory. This time around, technology was on the rise. Win 100 was complete with a televised color broadcast, a sideline reporter, and commentators, one of which was Joe's brother.
I'm Ray Scott. Here's George Paterno. The record, George, says North Carolina.
The game aired on a local Penn State station. In Win 100, Joe Paterno was shown on the screen for a total of 3 minutes and 28 seconds, precisely 1.5% of the total broadcast. The longest he went without appearing on the screen was 17 minutes and 27 seconds. His name was brought up on 5 separate occasions, and Win 100 was mentioned only 3 times.
Will be attempting to win his 100th game as a head coach here at Penn State.
No fans were shown with signs displaying 100. After the game, a handful of photographers swarmed Paterno for a picture, but he had no need for an escort as he made his way over to the sideline reporter. There were 6 throws to the sideline reporter, who was a former Penn State player. There was a pregame and postgame interview with Paterno, and Win 100 wasn't mentioned in any sideline reports or interviews. There was no post-game celebration or special coverage. Win number 200 came 11 years later in 1987. The 80s were even better to Paterno than the 70s had been. Paterno won 2 national championships that decade and was named Coach and Sportsman of the Year in 1986. He was in his 21st year of coaching and had an overall record of 199 wins, 44 losses, and 2 ties. Their opponent was Bowling Green, a small school out of the MAC conference that they had never played before. Although Penn State was now a school that most had heard of thanks to their national success, the game was still aired on a local station and received mostly local and statewide coverage. In this game, Joe was shown on the screen for a total of 9 minutes and 6 seconds, accounting for 9.7% of the total airtime. The longest he went without being shown was 16 minutes. His name was brought up 32 different times, 28 of which were football related and 5 that were not. Win number 200 was mentioned 4 times, and fans promoting the monumental win were shown only twice. There was no sideline reporter present in this broadcast. Upon completion of the victory, the commentators made no special announcement of the landmark. A handful of members of the media surrounded Paterno. There was a presentation of a plaque and a speech by the president of the university, and then by Paterno himself. The total post-game coverage and celebration was 4 minutes long. In 2001, the record that everyone was talking about belonged to Paul Bear Bryant. The coach had 324 wins, and Paterno was quickly catching up. Paterno was associated with coaching greats, and at this point had become a household name. Up until this point, Paterno had only 2 losing seasons out of 34 total, and the previous 2000 season was one of them. The one bright spot was an afternoon game against opponent Ohio State. Ohio State is and was one of Penn State's biggest rivals. It was head coach Jim Tressel's first season with the Buckeyes. They had defeated the Lions 45-6 at home last season. By 2001, technology was much more similar to what we are used to today. ESPN televised this game nationally in the high-quality sports broadcasting format that currently exists. Win 324 showed Paterno more than any other game for a total of 15 minutes and 38 seconds, accounting for 6.5% of the broadcast. He was mentioned 63 times, 34 of them football-related and 29 that were not. Win 324 was mentioned 25 different times, and fans with 324 were shown 14 times. The longest that Joe was not on screen was for 9 minutes and 54 seconds. There was a sideline reporter for this game for ESPN, who reported a total of 18 times. 15 of those reports were about Penn State, 10 of them about the game, and 5 about Joe, or 324. At the end of this game, we see the media swarm Paterno like they do today. There are hundreds around him, and event staff is necessary to protect Paterno. His wife Sue is on the field with him after this win, and they share an emotional moment. The sideline reporter asks questions that are all related to the coach's record-breaking win, and the post-game broadcast lasts for 3 minutes and 21 seconds. Paterno's most recent landmark win came just a few months ago when he became the only coach in Division I football history to achieve 400 wins. There wasn't anyone or any sports media outlet throughout the entire nation that wasn't talking about Paterno's record, and that showed when ESPN2 aired the game on national television.
Joe Paterno is already the winningest coach in major college football history. Today, he attempts to become the first FBS coach to reach 400 career wins.
Penn State was coming off of a successful 2009 season, but had struggled as of late in the 2010 season. Their opponent, Northwestern, was in the middle of a winning 6-2 season. Paterno was shown for 14 minutes and 31 seconds, accounting for 6.4% of the entire broadcast. His name was mentioned 56 different times by commentators, and the win was announced 17 times. Fans with 400 signs were shown 19 times. The longest span that Paterno was not shown was for 6 minutes and 46 seconds. There was a total of 5 sideline reports, including the halftime and post-game reports with Paterno. During the post-game, after Paterno's Lions managed to come back from a 21-point deficit to win, all questions were about Paterno's record-breaking victory. After the clock ticked down, hundreds of members of the media swarmed Paterno. Sue was one of the first by Joe's side, along with event staff, to control the crowd pressing on Paterno. The post-game broadcast lasted for 3 minutes and 46 seconds. Fans and people alike admired this legend and are always curious to see him pacing the sidelines in his traditional garb. In a summary of the data collected in these 5 landmark wins, Paterno was shown for a total of 24% of the broadcast. In the beginning of his uncertain career, game coverage did not center around him. 45 years later, Paterno has established his credibility and his identity on the sidelines during his Penn State football games. Coverage now focuses on him more than ever.